It is said that the man named Shabriri had his eyes gouged out as punishment for the crime of slander, and with time, the blight of the flame of frenzy came to dwell within the empty sockets. Thought is something that we take for granted. To be able to think is to be able to reason. To reason is to understand. So how do we understand that which seeks to tear away our understanding? The frenzied flame can be considered to be one of the most dangerous forces within the lands between. All who have encountered the flame have been rendered mad, insane, and overcome with pain. The frenzied flame itself, however, is no entity, but an order enacted by the greater will. The Ijemira helmet states, worn by those committed to high treason, it wards off the intervention of the greater will and its vassal fingers. A vassal is a holder of land by feudal tenure on conditions of homage and allegiance, and the description is plural, fingers, meaning that the greater will has multiple fingers as its vassals. To me, this means that the 3 fingers and the 2 fingers are both in allegiance to the greater will. To further the idea that these two are related, the Frenzy Flame Stone states that confers madness upon those who have not adopted the flame. Take care not to mistake this for its gentler cousin. This implies a kind of familial connection between this and the Warming Stone, which is blessed by the 2 fingers. So if the 3 fingers and the 2 fingers are in service to the greater will, then it begs the question of why are they constantly portrayed to be at such odds with each other? Well, that comes down to objectives. The 3 fingers objective is to find the Lord of Chaos and have them inherit the frenzied flame, while the 2 fingers seeks to find the next Elden Lord. Remember, both 2 and 3 fingers are considered vassals, holders of land. Perhaps instead of land, the fingers are given governance over certain aspects of the world. The 2 fingers is in charge of maintaining the Elden Ring, while 3 fingers is in charge of different things. In my opinion, I think the 3 fingers was ordered by the Great Will to spread the flame of frenzy. The 3 fingers seems to imply heavily that it is working to correct the mistake made by the Greater Will, and uses the flame of frenzy to do so.
Thank you. I have touched them. The words of the 3 fingers. As your maiden, allow me to divine them. All that there is came from the one great. Then came fractures, and births, and souls. But the greater will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, every one born of the mistake. And so, what was borrowed must be returned, melted all away with the yellow chaos flame, until all is one again. Those who gave me grapes howled without words, saying they wished they were never born. Become their lord, take their torment, despair, their affliction, every sin, every curse, and melt it all away. As the Lord of Chaos, no more fractures, no more birth.
The 3 fingers seems to be acting either on the greater will's command or perhaps independently. It seeks to use the frenzied flame to return everything into one whole, correcting the mistake of the great will. The frenzied flame then can almost be seen as a kind of a weapon, a sword used by the greater will or the 3 fingers to purge the mistake made. So then, what is the weapon? What is the frenzied flame? The frenzied flame is a flame of chaos that infects the minds of people through their eyes, causing maddening pain and endless crying. None of them have ever been able to control the frenzied flame, and those that have been afflicted by it desperately discovered techniques to both cleanse its progression and spread it. The first among these infected was Shabriri, a man that had his eyes gouged out as punishment for slander, Over time, these empty sockets became home for the Flame of Frenzy, and he became known as the most reviled man in all of history. The talisman, Shabriri's woe, is described as the corners of its mouth being raised, almost in a flirtatious manner. I take this to mean that it is smirking. So the question becomes, why is it smirking? And how does this relate to the Frenzied Flame? Well, I think the Frenzied Flame is a kind of truth. The reason Shabriri is smirking is that I think he was feeling validated after looking into the Frenzied Flame, because I think his crime of slander was that he believed that the Greater Will saw their birth, or thought, as a mistake. The Frenzied Flame is described by Melina as chaos.
It is chaos, devouring life and thought unending.
She tells us that there is beauty in life and birth, enduring through despair, and heavily implies that the Frenzied Flame would cease all of this. So I think that the Frenzied Flame causes madness and pain because it devours your life, your thought, your despair, and holds birth. The purpose of the flame is to bring everything together as one. Perhaps then, the Frenzied Flame is forcibly merging the consciousness of all beings infected by it. We can see the incantations themselves, that the flame bursts forth from the eyes, and the inescapable frenzy incantation has you grabbing onto an enemy and gazing into their eyes, spreading the madness. Interesting to note here is the description. To gaze into one another's eyes is truly the most intimate form of human contact. To me, this means that the frenzy is spread from staring into the flame. The flame resides within your eyes, and gazing into it causes you to be infected by it. In this way, the flame is not attacking you, but showing you something. Looking into the flame causes you to be infected. Shabriri tells us something interesting. Burn the Earth Tree to the ground, and incinerate all that divides and distinguishes. Shabriri wants nothing more than for us to become the Lord of Chaos. He's telling us in no small way that the Frenzied Flame will burn away things that distinguish and divide. Things like personality, appearance, life, death, are all things that help us tell one from another. The Frenzied Flame even exists within spirit. Even death does not dispel the affliction. This all suggests that the Frenzied Flame is something that attacks the consciousness. Hyetta and Shabriri are the two main figures that push us toward the Flame of Chaos, and both seem capable of hopping from body to body. It seems that those that are afflicted by the Flame of Frenzy become part of it, as Shabriri tells us upon dying that he is Chaos incarnate and cannot die, and he has described the Flame of Frenzy multiple times as Chaos, and upon the ending, becoming the Lord of Chaos is to become the Lord of the Frenzied Flame. During the ending, the player's head becomes engulfed in fire and turns into the Frenzied Flame, a kind of eye of Sauron. They begin stoking the flame, and we see that it burns away the sky and is burning away at everything else. What's interesting here is that you can see fingerprints on the walls and on the buildings, the same kind of fingerprints that appear on Vik's armor, a man that was burned by the Flame of Frenzy, and similar to the burns on the player after they are chosen by the Three Fingers. This is the Three Fingers and the Flame of Frenzy working in tandem to burn away everything for, in my opinion, the Greater Will. By correcting its mistake and turning everything into one, the Greater Will can achieve its aims. I believe the Frenzied Flame to be the sword of the Greater Will, a weapon used by it to correct its mistake, a force, a truth that can burn away thoughts and life itself, a weapon that merges everything into one single thing, which I think is either the unification of all things or the elimination of free thought. Perhaps the reason the Two Fingers was even created was to indoctrinate those with free thought into worshipping it, so they would not try to fight against the Great Will. Returning to the E.G. Mirror Helm, its description states that it wards off the intervention of the Greater Will and its vassals. If free thought was capable of warding off the Greater Will's intervention and its vassals' intervention, then maybe given enough time, those with free thought could have found ways to fight against it, against the Greater Will. This was the purpose of the Two Fingers then, and the Three Fingers. The Two Fingers seeks to control those with thought, and the Three Fingers seeks to eliminate them on a mass scale. In this way, the Frenzied Flame can be viewed as so many different things: a weapon, an order, a unifying force, or even something different entirely. There are, of course, also alternate ways to interpret all of this. The Flame of Frenzy can also be viewed as a kind of opposing force to the Greater Will, a god in its own right born from the mistake of the Greater Will. that seeks to infect everything and burn away all that distinguishes. If the Elden beast is the concept of order, the flame of frenzy can entirely represent the concept of chaos. In this interpretation, you can view the three fingers as a creation of the flame of frenzy, its own vassal that was created to find a vessel for the flame of frenzy. Gazing into the flame of frenzy likely then gives a glimpse into the existence of this god of the flame of chaos that drives men insane. Not too dissimilar from something like Cthulhu from Lovecraft. The mere sight of it is enough to drive you mad. This would explain the fighting between the fingers and the three fingers, and would perhaps explain why Melina has such an overwhelming desire to kill you should you become Lord of the Frenzied Flame. In this way, the Frenzied Flame is a god that consumes thought and life, an offensive monster that stands in stark contrast to the mostly defensive nature of the two fingers and the Golden Order. You can interpret the Frenzied Flame as perhaps part of the Great One that split off from it, like the Greater Will, and each is an individual part of the Great One. One part order, which seeks to control all that exists, while the other seeks chaos in all things. The fact that the Great One seemed to have no autonomy of its own, didn't do anything at all, kind of implies chaos was more of the One Great's consciousness, and it makes sense too. Three fingers are more than two. If the One Great was once all things, then what if the flame of frenzy is the majority of the Great One's consciousness, seeking to return to the Great Whole? The mistake caused itself to divide and divide and divide, and the One Great wishes to return to one whole. You can view the chaos of the frenzied flame as maybe the true intentions of the One Great, returning to one whole, One Great, or maybe view it as a primordial force that the One Great used to create everything, and in doing so, made the mistake of division. In this way, the reason for madness and pain being spread from the frenzied flame is that we see a kind of truth in the frenzied flame, transcendent knowledge that is beyond our understanding, drawing from the Lovecraft influences in these outer gods. They spread their influence. This alone is enough to drive us insane. Just spreading the idea is enough to send us into a frenzy. In many of the endings for Elden Ring, we see the body of Marika be used in some way to use the Elden Ring to create a new world. However, in the Flame of Frenzy ending, the player, now the Lord of Chaos, just walks past the body and begins returning the world to one. This kind of implies that the Frenzied Flame doesn't need the body of Marika to accomplish its goal, whereas every other outer god in the endings seem to require the Elden Ring in order to accomplish their goals. Whereas the Frenzied Flame seems to be on such a sufficient level, perhaps a greater level than the Elden Ring itself, that it doesn't need the Elden Ring to accomplish its goal. It is self-sufficient in merging the world as one whole, creating a new world entirely, removing division. Outer gods, they seem to require the Elden Ring to create much lesser seeming worlds. Even the idea of curing the Frenzied Flame has implications. The act of piercing yourself with Miquella's needle in a place beyond time, to me, implies that it requires the influence of time to even affect the Frenzied Flame, and even then, the Frenzied Flame may not even be cured, just moved to a different part of time, to a different person. Perhaps this person was Shabriri, the man who started it all. Maybe in curing yourself of the Frenzied Flame, you cause it to be spread in the first place. If the One Great is all five fingers, order and chaos, then it influences much of how we perceive the other outer gods. But that's a topic for another time. I'm still learning so much about Elden Ring, and it's an exceptionally deep game. I'm going to miss some things, but hopefully not too much. Nothing in a FromSoft game is ever clear-cut, and so I thought it was required of me to give an alternate look at things. There's so much more I wanted to talk about, but without exploring every crack of Elden Ring, I doubt I'll be able to convey my thoughts well. Let me know what your interpretations are though. What do you think the ultimate goal of the Greater Will is? How do you think Shabriri first came to be infected by the Flame of Frenzy? And did you just subscribe and like the video? Let me know your answers in the comments below. Special thank you to Seth the Programmer for giving me an alternate perspective on parts of the lore. If you like this video and want to see more Elden Ring content, you can find me on Twitter or in the comment section. Goodbye and have a nice day.